Okay, so I wanted to do a quick video to go over how crit and heavy attack influence our dots. They're definitely valuable stats to have, however, because dots don't update dynamically, this plays into a little bit of a more complex playstyle. You can pay attention to this and really min-max when your heavies land and what you do with them, however, for the most part, you're not going to be playing around them in PvP. So just to explain, dots don't update dynamically. So what that means is that per dot tick, there isn't a calculation for heavy attack or crit attack. Instead, the calculation is done at the point that we apply the curse or refresh the curse. So to give you an example, I've got a sword on to push myself up to the 50 bracket so that we can see a heavy attack when it lands. So a normal dot tick that we can see on this is around the 137, 138 mark. So I'll just go through cycling through these target dummies, and we'll look to proc a heavy attack, and then that will show you how, unlike other classes, we don't get the 2x modifier. So there's a heavy on that. So we're at the 275 mark. You can tell that that's a heavy attack because it's double the damage. Now this will tick, or every tick of this will now be a heavy attack for the full duration. However, if we refresh this and we don't get a heavy attack, we're now at 2 stacks and we're at the same 275 damage. So we didn't heavy attack, which means that now for the remaining duration of this curse, it will be a normal tick. And the same can be said once we get to 3. So we'll look to get this to proc into a heavy attack. I don't think that is at 400. So we're at 400 here, and we're looking at proccing this into a heavy, and then that's going to show us what a full 3 stack heavy is on a target. And the same thing happens for crit. It only appears at the application of the dot. Now this becomes interesting when we get a heavy attack and we Karmic. That doesn't spread the heavy attack to every target. Instead, it counts as a new application of the dot. So if we go ahead and Karmic this once we get a heavy attack, you'll see that unless it heavies on the target, we won't carry that damage across. This makes it an interesting playstyle in terms of paying attention to when heavies land, because in an ideal world you want to spread those heavies and get the most damage possible. But as you can see, even with 50 strength, we're not proccing heavies massively often, and this is, there we go. So we finally got the heavy attack on the dot, 824, but now when we Karmic this, for some targets it will revert to normal, and for this front target it's now a heavy attack as well for the remainder of the duration. So that's how heavy attack and crit work in this game. It's not a dynamic update, it's on a per application basis, and it's the same for all dots in the game. So the calculation is made at the point of applying that dot. So when the stars align and we do manage to get heavy attacks on somebody, and we manage to spread those and it procs multiple heavy attacks on multiple people, that's when we see the insane bursts of damage. It's not because of any kind of one heavy attack happening. It is purely because the dots have managed to proc. The other thing that can heavy attack though is also our curse explosion. So some of these insane curse explosions that we see will actually land as a heavy attack as well. So we've got a heavy on just the one target here, but curse explosion can proc a heavy on its own, or a crit on its own, or a crit heavy as well. I am still really fuzzy from being sick, but I'm hoping that kind of helps you to understand how heavy attack and crit impact our dots. And this is a lot of why when I say I play around builds that have consistent damage, which is why I switched to Aquarius damage daggers for the base damage. I prefer the consistency of regular damage over the RNG of heavy damage or crit. That being said, I do run crit and heavy at much higher values once we move into tier 2, but again my gear choices when we get access to things like the Sacred and Tevant is going to be all based around consistent damage, and where we can get that consistent damage to allow our burst to be reliable so that we know what to expect. Then if the stars align and we do get heavies, it's fantastic and you see some insane numbers and it's great to watch. If you've got any questions about this, just drop them in the comment section. I'll try and answer them as best I can. But I did want to clarify this for people because I know that there's very little information on dots and how they work around there, but this is essentially a bit of a ranty TLDR for you. Heavy attack and crit is based on the application of the dot, either that being a new dot, a refresh, or a Karmic version of the dot, and that's as you can see in this video as well. Thanks.